This is my recreation of the Pemberley dress from the film Pride and Prejudice, brackets 2005. If you're new to the channel, hi, hello, I love Pride and Prejudice. Anyone who calls the book basic can come from me, it is the hill I'm ready to fight on. I'm also a sucker for the 2005 film adaptation, and if you're about to say, but Kat, what about the 1995 BBC adaptation? I'd say, that's not what this video is about, so. As a seamstress, I see it, I want it, I make it. To differing degrees of success. I've never really liked Regency Fashion, it doesn't interest me and the silhouette is not flattering on my body, but these costumes are a little different. If you'd like some more thoughts on the costumes, I'll link a video down below about that, but I do really like a lot of what Lizzie wears in this film. So I've made a dress from the film before, and I feel like I got pretty close to a copy of the dress. I hand dyed the fabric, I toned the shades, it was pretty close. But I don't really ever wear that dress because I don't feel great in it. While the shape is flattering on Keira Knightley, it is not on me. So you might think, then why the heck are you making another? Well, I thought, I love the Pemberley dress too. Look, here is this perfect fabric. Let's try it, but instead of attempting a film accurate replica, I will make some alterations to make the dress more suitable to me and my body. And I think that's alright. Well, let's start with a brief dress analysis. The Pemberley dress is a one-piece dress worn about 3/4 into the film, when Lizzie visits Pemberley with her aunt and uncle. The dress features a high waistline, not quite empire, a wrap front and a simple skirt with some gathering across the back panels. This dress I feel is very pretty in its simplicity, with no additional decorations, but the striped fabric is cleverly used for some interest, such as the bias cut waistband, hemband, and matching the stripes into chevrons on the back panels and inner sleeves. The only other decoration on the dress are some buttons, which seem to be entirely functional, and some embroidery on the back. The sleeves appear to be a two-piece sleeve, while the bodice has a narrow back with 2 panels and 2 panels at the front. I could not locate an underarm seam. That's not to say there isn't one. The skirt is mostly likely a combination of 2 rectangles gathered slightly at the sides of the front piece and gathered throughout the back piece. In terms of how it fits with Regency Fashion, well, I mentioned in the video about the costumes that it seems like the director has set the film closer to when Jane Austen would have written it, rather than in the Regency period as most other film adaptations. The Regency period was roughly between 1811 to 1820. Pride and Prejudice, though published in 1813, was actually written between 1796 and 1797. 15 years in fashion can mean a lot. This dress fits within the principles of the early 1800s aesthetics, which include vertical, narrow lines. I would say though that the V-neck would probably have been accessorized to be filled. If you'd like to see some great examples of accessorizing in this rough time period, may I recommend Emma from 2020. Now that we have some idea about how the dress works and fits within its context, it's time to locate a pattern and adapt it. I turned to Patterns of Fashion 1 as a starting point. I really like using a historical pattern as a starting point as I find it easier than drafting my own. Although there were no patterns that matched exactly what I was going for, there was one similar wrap front dress in the book, dated circa 1795 to 1799, from the V&A Museum. The pattern I'll be using is actually for the fitted lining of the bodice. I started by sizing it up. I used Morgan Donner's method, which I'll link below. It's super useful. Okay, so here we have a pattern that took way longer than it should have. This is from Patterns of Fashion 1, page 102. This is the second edition, not the first, so I'm not sure if it's included in the first. I have it, I could check, I'm not going to. This is a dress from circa 1795 to 1799, and it is a round gown, which means it's got some ease and you just sort of tie it, wraps around your front. It seemed similar enough, especially the back is exactly what I was looking for. So now I'm just going to cut it out. I've just taped it together. I'm just going to cut it out and take some measurements to see, for example, where the waist would be located. And I think I'm going to turn this into a V instead, because that's what is on the dress. And I'm also going to measure the waist because this probably won't fit me. And after I've done some very initial pattern alterations, I'm going to do a mock-up, and I think I'll come back to you for that. I did my due diligence to any project I care about, and I made 3 mock-ups. There is no footage of the first one because it was so bad I couldn't put it on. This pattern was tiny, and so I had to expand it significantly to get a mock-up that would fit me. This is mock-up number 2. I worked on lowering the waistline as the original is not quite so empire and it was still short at the back. I used the bottom edge of my Regency short stays as the reference of where I wanted the waistline of the bodice to be, with the knowledge that I would then add a 1-inch waistband to it. The neckline also needed fixing as it wasn't a proper V, along with other slight alterations. Mock-up number 3 had way more room and fit way better. The neckline just needed a slight trim. I ended up adding too much room to the back, which I trimmed away, and the front armhole needed to be added too, but otherwise I was happy to go ahead with it. In terms of materials, I found this striped cotton on Etsy for £8.50 a metre, and I bought the last 5 metres, and that was just enough. It was sold to me as cotton, but after taking an iron to it, I'm pretty sure it's a polycotton blend, but it's pretty perfect in terms of the pattern, so I wasn't really bothered. I pre-washed it as I want this dress to be machine washable, and then proceeded to cut out my pieces. I also cut the bodice out of a heavier linen to use as an interlining because I thought it could use the extra structure. I was planning on using quick and modern construction methods for this dress, as it isn't meant to be a historical Regency dress, but a recreation from a film. But that didn't quite go according to plan. Once I had all my pieces, I assembled the striped cotton and the linen separately. I then lined them up together and basted them so I could try it on. I'll take a second here to reinforce something. I never used to try on stuff during the construction process. I like to stop making it and continue all the way until it's done and then wear it. But it's so important to try it on during construction, and I'm so glad I did, because this was a hot mess. It didn't fit right anywhere. It didn't really fit at all. I'm still not sure why. The last mock-up had been way more successful than the way the bodice was at this point in time. I was so disappointed there's no footage of that. Let's talk really briefly about obstacles. So I started assembling these 3 pattern bits, so I thought it was going to be a really quick and easy project because the bodice has literally 3 parts, except obviously I then added this one seam because I noticed that in reference photos there is a seam there. I had a well-fitting mock-up. You guys saw it. I even filmed it and I put it on here, and I did up all of the external fabric, all the seams, and then I did up all of the linen, and then I pinned them together to try on, and I could not for the life of me get this bloody thing on. I don't know what's happened while cutting, but as you can see here, the 1-inch seam allowance that I've added to the shoulder has completely disappeared. I don't know where that's gone, and that's at the front and back. I don't understand. I don't understand. But so we're regrouping and changing tactics. So I've decided to baste the outer fabric to the linen, which is probably what I should have done in the first place anyway, but I was feeling lazy. And then I traced out my pattern pieces, and that's my new seam lines. You can see that my seam allowance is going to be real scanty in some places, just because I have no idea what's happened. I really just don't understand. This seems really weird as well. Like, could it really have warped that much on the bias? I'm going to play around with the placement of this front because I'm not convinced. Anyway, we are now going to trim back this to match the outer fabric, and then I'm going to baste the shoulder and back seams and try it on, and hopefully it will fit. And it did fit. I honestly still don't know where the seam allowances went. I added a 1-inch seam allowance to all seams when I was cutting, and I ended up with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on some parts. Either way, a lot of basting later, it was on and I could make it work. However, there was still something weird going on with the shoulder and the neckline, so I decided to start on the sleeves, because the sleeves would also affect that fit. So for the sleeves, I picked these from Patterns of Fashion 1. It is not quite clear in the reference pictures, but I do believe it's a 2-part sleeve like this. And so this is what I've done. I scaled it up in the same way as before, but I had to do some really heavy alterations to it. Here is my final pattern for it. You can kind of see where the original was. I obviously had to increase it a lot because my arms are bigger. I used the slash and spread method for some of it where I wanted to keep the top shape, and I also tried to expand it a little bit because this sleeve does seem to have a little tiny little bit of gathering at the back and front, so I tried to do that. And then the other thing I really wanted to do is, if you look at the close references of the photos, this inside seam here down from the elbow to the wrist actually has chevron, and they line up and match. So now I was trying to cut it. I tried to do that, but I don't think it'll work. I think the angle on these isn't quite right, but we'll see. So now all I've done is I have flatlined the sleeves to linen like this, and I'm just going to sew up the side seams. This outer seam is only sewn up to here, and then it is left open, and then it closes with buttonholes, which I think will be really cute. And then after that I'm going to set them in. I'm not going to finish any seams because I did cut this with a 1-inch seam allowance in case something goes wrong, because the bodice has really put me off with so many things going wrong. So those are the next steps, and I shall see you soon. So I've just basted on this sleeve so I could check the fit, and it's pretty horrendous. I really don't understand what's going on with this dress. It seems that the mock-ups do not translate to the final thing at all. I'm still having so many fit issues with this bodice. The neckline is way lower than it should have been, even after all the mock-ups. It gapes way too much at the front here. Just doesn't fit. And then this sleeve is also catastrophically wrong. So I think I am going to pause this project and step away and cry. I had such a breakdown after this footage. I went and cried in the living room and gave the dress a timeout for a few hours. But then I recouped and I went in with determination to fix it. I think I was really hung up on making it as close to the film as possible, but I don't have Keira Knightley's body, so it would never work like that for me. Once I accepted that mine would look different to fit me, I was able to get past it and do what needed to be done. So I think the last clip of this costume was me having a breakdown on a Wednesday, because I couldn't make the sleeves work. But here we are. I stepped away for a bit and I recouped and I'm back. And I was able to fix the sleeves as much as I can. So I think I should tell you what I did. So I cut away the linen interlining that I cut out. It was just adding too much bulk to the sleeves and I couldn't otherwise make them fit me. When I first started making up the sleeves, I had thought they were too big. So I cut off 1/2 inch of the 1-inch seam allowance I'd added. That was a big mistake. They were not too big, they were too small. And so this back seam here is actually 1/4 inch at the top, but I had to do what I could. So I did actually leave a few inches of the linen interlining here, and that's just because this is going to be the closure and that'll help support the buttons and buttonholes. You can kind of see it, which I didn't really anticipate, but I don't think it's a big deal. Otherwise, the sleeves are okay-ish. So I really struggled with the positioning here as well. I have great movement, so because there's a lot of fabric here, almost like a gusset. There's a lot of fabric, so I have really good movement of my arm, but it's still a bit tight and I don't really have anywhere else that I can let it out. Yeah, and the sleeves also ended up a tiny bit short, even though I added an extra inch, whatever. It's gonna be what it's gonna be. And then what else? So I still have the gaping neckline issue here. I tried pinning some of it away. Maybe I could do a dart, but then I decided not to. And I'm not really confident in setting in the sleeves until I figured out how to control this neckline, because once I set in the sleeve, that's the shoulder seam done and I can't mess with it. So I'm trying to figure out what to do. The only thing I can really think of to try and stop the sleeves from dragging this down and out is to add to the shoulder seam. There, maybe add like a little strip. I don't have any more seam allowance there, I also messed that up. But if I add like a little 1-inch strip, that might help. And then I can undo some of the gathering at the back there, and that'll give me extra room. So I think that's my plan for now. We'll see how that goes. And then if that fixes the problem of dragging the sleeves out, then I might try and finalize this neckline. I've taken away as much as I can. There's no seam allowance left here, and it's still a little wide from what I wanted, but that's what it is. And so the way to finalize it is I need to whip stitch down the cotton to the linen, and then I'm going to run 2 really small running stitches across the edges, and then a little tape just in between those, and hopefully try to gather that in a little bit and see how that looks. There's a lot of experimentation in this, which is why the process is taking so long. I wished it was a straightforward dress. It's not. Gosh, I sounded really defeated there, didn't I? This bodice really took it out of me, but I did all of that, exactly what I described, and it worked wonders. I finished the neckline by turning the seam allowances under and hand sewing them together, doing 2 lines of small running stitches which created a channel around the neckline. I could then thread some thin cotton string through it and pull the neckline to ease and fit, getting rid of the gaping problems. Mostly. I also added a 1-inch piece extension to the shoulder seam, which fixed a lot of the issues too and added more room to the armhole. And that was it for the bodice. Let's move on to the skirt. Perhaps to compensate for the bodice related breakdowns, the skirt came together really easily. I knew from the beginning that I didn't want to make a simple Regency style gathered rectangular skirt because those aren't very flattering on me. So after taking some measurements so that the seams would align with the bodice, I decided to use this flared skirt pattern. I've made an Edwardian inspired skirt with this pattern, and I'll link that video down below. But I adapted it so that I could add the gathering to mimic the original dress and cut it out, adding as much flare as I could. Flare is key. The skirt is made of 7 panels with the center front cut on the fold. The side seams are sewn up, leaving a gap for a pocket. Yes, I did remember. Then I did running stitches to gather the tops where needed. I like doing this with 2 long darning needles at the same time, and I think it goes by a bit faster. I could have done this by machine, but I didn't. It'd been so long at this point, I just thought I might as well enjoy the sewing process. I then added the waistband to the bottom of the bodice, and then the skirt to the waistband, all by machine. I leveled out the hem and started working on the hemband, which is a bias cut strip lined with lightweight linen to add a little something to the hem swish. I then understitched the hemband, adding a piece of string, which adds a little more body to the hem. It's sewn on right sides together, then the linen is turned under and hand finished down. I had some seam finishing to do and some other bits which took ages. I added 6 buttons, 4 buttonholes and 2 chain stitch button loops. I ended up not doing the embroidery at the back, but I'm not sure that was the right decision. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. I can still add it, I think. So I didn't quite explain the closures for this dress, so I thought I'd just take a moment to do it. So obviously, as you might have noticed, this has a wrap front here, and the skirt is attached to the bodice, so it's all one piece. In the film, you can clearly see she's got 2 buttons at the side, one at the waistband and one at the top, so that's what I did. There's 2 buttons and chain stitch button loops there, and so we'll be working from the outside in. But the way this works is it opens like this. I left this gap here in the skirt, so the side seam just doesn't go all the way up, and then there is an eyelet in the waistband which has a string threaded through, and this ties together, keeping that really flush. And you can use just hooks and eyes or buttons or whatever here, but I chose a string because this means I can tighten it or loosen it depending on how my body changes. And then this string from the neckline, I just tie it to that string as well so that I don't have to add any other stuff there. Then on the inside here, I have the string that comes down from this neckline tied to a chain stitch tack that I did on here. This isn't perfect. I might change it in the future, but that just keeps it on the inside there. And then we have the 2 buttons, and that is just for the waist. So this gap here is left open, but because of the overlap, it's hidden, and because of the gathering, it disguises it quite well, I think. And then the only other 2 closures are on the sleeves respectively, with 2 little buttonholes and buttons. So I can put this on by myself. It's super comfortable, and yeah. Shall we go for some nice footage? And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I'm proud for persevering on this dress, though I found the bodice really challenging. I think it's a cute dress, and I hope I get somewhere out of it. If you'd like to support my channel, please consider visiting my Patreon, which I'll link below. I'd like to thank my top tier patrons, Alexa, Lourdes and Melly. And should I make more Pride and Prejudice dresses? Or do I have enough? See you next week.